Hello, this is Steve Hermann, author of Mediumship Mastery, the Ultimate Guide, and I'm going to be talking a bit about a subject which I really don't cover in my book, Mediumship Mastery. Mediumship Mastery is totally focused on mediumistic development, how to improve and strengthen your mediumship and be a more proficient vehicle for the higher personalities in the spirit world to work through. What we're going to be talking about in this video, it's called Spirit Rescue, and I don't cover that in my book. It's actually a subject which is very controversial because in a lot of ways it sounds pretty hokey. So if you talk to different mediums, ask them about, rescue circles, rescue mediums, are you able to help someone? They've passed over into the spirit world. Oh yes, and we have these circles, these groups of people, we get together, and some poor soul comes who's stuck, they're earthbound, and then we send them to the light. Has anyone heard about this before? Now, there's some mediums who will say, oh, that's just a bunch of bunk. That's just not the way it works. That's sensationalistic. Someone passes into the spirit world. They get help from people in the spirit world. There's healers, there's therapists there, and they don't necessarily need any type of help from anyone here on the physical plane. Everything is just, and some people say, oh, everything is just light. You go to the spirit world, it's all just beautiful, unconditional love and bliss. All your problems, any dirt within your own mind and emotions, that's all left behind. But actually, if we really examine the situation, we know that the teacher Jesus, what did he teach? In my Father's house are many mansions. So he wasn't talking about any type of housing developments or condos within your particular city being developed. He was talking about different levels of the spirit world, literally different spheres or planes of consciousness that interpenetrate each other based on vibration. So based on your consciousness as an individual while you're here in the physical plane, once you kick the bucket, and you don't have to be psychic to predict that every single one of us is going to kick the bucket at some point. Hopefully not this week, and hopefully not Thursday at 4:30. But we're going to pass over. We're going to go to the spirit world. Based on our consciousness, we're going to wind up in a particular place. So the idea behind a spirit rescue circle is you have a group of people, you have the group energy, and it's healing mediumship, and it's focused on helping some individual, perhaps due to emotional imbalance, perhaps due to some type of very materialistic or earthly type of attachments, which might even be something that's really a vice that's not on such a high level, some type of sex or substance abuse. People can be very attached to these types of things. So when you go to the spirit world, minus your physical body, your subtle body carries with it emotionally and mentally so much baggage and so much debris. Now, are there higher teachers in the spirit world? Of course there are. Are there individuals who are therapists and healers in the spirit world? Yes, there are. And they work with people like this who make the transition. But you can just imagine if you're in a war situation, or maybe there's a sudden accident and just you're unexpectedly, as the individual finds themselves in the spirit world, sometimes they can actually use some help. We see in a lot of religions, in a general sense, the idea of praying for people, praying for those who've passed over, to help them with their transition. A very good book on spirit rescue is written by Dr. Carl Wickland, and he was a medical doctor. He was based in Los Angeles for quite a long time. His wife was a trance medium, and he wrote actually two different books. One which is called A Gateway to Understanding, which is fantastic when we talk about mediumship, trance work, and connecting with the spirit world. And the other book, 30 Years Among the Dead, which documents his therapeutic work, treating people with what he felt were obsessions from people in the spirit world. And actually he would work with these particular spirits who were causing problems for people, different psychological types of problems, different physical types of problems. They would control his wife. He would connect with them and therapeutically counsel them and help them to go up to a higher type of level. And I know in my own experiences doing sessions over the years, certainly the higher spirits have brought people to those sessions, even as communicators in a lot of cases, who needed the help. We see with a lot of the spiritualists, or spiritists as they call themselves, the followers of the very famous and very prominent French spiritualist who wrote under the pseudonym of Allan Kardec 5 classic works on spiritualism: the Medium's book, the Spirit's book, the Gospel according to Spiritism, Heaven and Hell, and Genesis. His books are excellent. But a lot of those groups, which you find prominent worldwide, a lot of them will focus in on doing work with people and with the spirits who maybe aren't on such a high type of level. So, because there's a lot of different levels in the world of the spirit. I remember one of my teachers in mediumship, and she was a trance medium, so when we would have a circle, part of the circle at her home would consist, during the meditation part, of spirit teachers coming through and communicating. And she had a lot of experience in terms of her own training as a medium. She was from upstate New York, and she actually, in her early development, for years sat in a particular home circle of this one prominent medium at the Lilydale Assembly, which is the world's largest spiritualist community, just going southwest of Buffalo, New York. And she would sit there every week. Now, she started working with trance, and she was getting a lot of individual attention and support from the leader of the group, her teacher and mentor, even one-on-one training with the trance. But then she also started doing it in the circle, and she'd have different teachers coming through, or guides to speak philosophy. And she was starting out, but she also started having, because the higher spirits would do this, they would bring these individuals into the circle who were really messed up, who needed healing. They had passed over, they had physically died, they had passed over, gone to the spirit world, and they really had difficulty adjusting and wanting to go up to a higher type of level. So these individuals would control her, and they would speak, and the other members of the group would assist in communicating with the spirits and helping these particular souls who were very wounded go up to a higher level to receive the healing. Now, if you listen to that, that sounds pretty hokey, doesn't it? How's that evidential? How do you prove something? Maybe she's just deluded. And yet this is her experience as a medium. Learning to be able to connect, the spirits working through her energy field, coming in very close, controlling her voice box. She's disassociating when this is taking place. So that's her own experience. But someone watching this would just think, oh my God, this is just nuts. These people think that you can actually do that. So anyway, she was divorced, and she started dating this really nice man, and he was a medical doctor. His name was Joe. He's an extremely nice man, really into the medical practice for all the right reasons. So they started dating, and she pretty much just kept her involvement in spiritualism a big secret. Let's face it, if you're a medium, you're involved in development, you might be very hesitant about opening up with it. Maybe you wouldn't, but let's just say you met someone, they weren't really into this, and you start dating them or being involved with them with a personal relationship, you probably wouldn't just come out and start saying, hey, I'm into talking to the deceased, and I go to the circle, and I go to spiritualist churches, things like this. But anyway, so she kept it a secret for a while, but eventually she started sharing what she was into, because he was driving her to Lilydale and he'd wait out in the car while she went to the circle. So eventually he started attending, and he started developing himself, but he was still pretty skeptical. This guy's been to medical school, and he uses his common sense. He's not gullible about this, As much as he supported her and loved her, in the back of his head, he was still thinking, could this stuff really be real? And of course, if you talk about spirit rescue, that's something which is pretty far out. Anyway, So he was in Buffalo, New York, and as part of his position as a medical doctor, he so happened he had shifts in the emergency room in one of the hospitals in the Buffalo area. And he had like these all-night shifts, these 12-hour, 3 days in a row shifts, and he was there all night. And you get all sorts of things, any of you who've, in the medical profession, who've actually worked in an emergency room, what to speak of someone who actually has had to go in there and wait for hours. I mean, it's usually pretty busy. And you can get some pretty extreme cases. So this one particular evening, he was in the emergency room, and what happened? There was this horrible accident that had taken place on the highway. And the ambulances were bringing in the victims or the survivors of this particular accident. A lot of people were injured. There had been some fatalities. And one of the severely injured was a 17-year-old boy. And he was severely injured. He had lost great amounts of blood. The nurses, the physicians, medical staff, I mean, they were so concerned. They did everything they could to give care to this young man, to help him, to save his life. And really, because he had lost so much blood, the only thing they could do to save his life would be to have given him a blood transfusion. But this young man was a Jehovah's Witness. And his family was Jehovah's Witnesses. And legally, because blood transfusion it's something which is one of the tenets which, if you're a Jehovah's Witness or some denominations of Christianity, that's not something that you believe in a biblical sense. So there was absolutely no way that they were able legally to give him a blood transfusion. So what do you think happened? This young man, he passed into the spirit world. And you can only imagine how devastated, how traumatic it was for all of the medical people, the nurses and doctors. And I mean, Joe went home that night and after a shift, and I mean, he didn't say anything to his wife. He didn't say anything to her. He didn't mention anything to her. And they really hadn't been together that long, but they were now married, and he understood things about spiritualism, of course, too, and he was going to these classes. And they went the next day. But he hadn't mentioned anything about this young man that had passed over. But it deeply affected him, because it's not something that you have every day. Even if you're in an emergency room, you don't have people passing over left and right just like that, in a general sense. So anyway, they were at the circle the next night, and they had the meditation. You've got 15, 20 people. The energy was so high in the seance room of this particular medium. The energy was incredible, and the higher teachers were there from spirit, very much attuning. And that's when my friend, she felt very strongly that there was a spirit. And this spirit was very disturbed, very lost, and needed to go on to a higher level, and the spirit communicated. It was this particular individual coming through his spirit was exceptionally resistant, did not like the fact that they had passed over, was resisting the fact that they had passed over. So the other people in the circle, as a group, they were praying for the spirit. They were trying to rationally reason with it, the individual, sending the spirit healing, sending this troubled soul light and positive healing energy. And it was a bit more of a struggle. I mean, she really could feel, because when you're doing with trance type of work or any type of spirit mediumship work, you have higher spirits. They give you energy. Somebody who's on a lower type of level, they don't really give you a lot of energy. The higher spirits and your own energy will enable that individual to come through. And it was a bit of a struggle for her. She's bringing the spirit through. But eventually, they were able to reason with the spirit, and the spirit was able to move on into the light. Now, my friend Joe, her husband Joe, the physician, was witnessing all of this, participating in all of this. And he just thought, oh, this is just nuts. How can this be? But what flipped him out completely, what startled him the most significantly, were the last words that the Spirit spoke prior to releasing the control over his wife. And those words were, "Why didn't they give me the blood? Why didn't they give me the blood?" And you can just imagine, he was just blown away by this, because it was that young man that had passed over the night before, who had bled to death in the emergency room, the Jehovah's Witness boy. So, in terms of evidence, that completely changed his complete view of mediumship. It was just totally unexpected. And that's the type of evidence which will literally give someone complete, absolute conviction in the reality of all these types of things. Now, we can only imagine that the higher spirits arranged for that to happen. Obviously for the healing of that boy, and certainly in terms of Joe's unfoldment as a medium, to give him greater confidence, greater conviction, and understanding about what this stuff is. So that particular story illustrates quite a bit, and it is something to think about. There's a lot of people who go around and say, oh my gosh, you've got all these spirits attached, there are all these lost spirits, there's an earthbound spirit in the house, we've got to exorcise this place. A lot of that stuff is just completely whacked out. It's not based on reality. But there's a lot of different levels of the spirit world. And of course, we may have our own toxicities, we may have our own problems and faults. These are things ideally to work on while we're here. Because once we kick the bucket, once we pass over into the spirit world, we're going to have to work on those types of things there. Now, I oftentimes joke with people, if you need 50 years of psychotherapy and you don't get it while you're here in the physical plane, what's going to happen? You're going to definitely have to get that therapy when you go to the spirit world. The therapists in the spirit world will have their hands full. You cannot avoid growth. And your prayers that you send out to individuals who've passed over, your love from your heart and your energy, thoughts are things. And that dynamic power of love reaches people. The healing light reaches people here in the physical plane, but it simultaneously is able to touch, nurture, and deeply affect individuals who's made the transition. The spirit world is literally all around us. Our thoughts blend with their thoughts, and they're able to influence us. And likewise, we can similarly assist them with their own soul growth and progression. So, if you like this video, please like it. If you don't like it, you can check that too. But please subscribe to my channel. If you're interested in the development, please check out my book, Mediumship Mastery. It doesn't have anything about spirit rescue in it directly, but it does talk about the mechanics, and it's very good for running groups for mediumship. So may you continue forward with your growth as a medium and a healer, and may God bless each and every one of you. Thank you so much for watching.